our alignment options here in the top here. The alignment options become immediate board or the top center of the artboard, or it becomes relative to those two or in top, left, center, right, top, becomes a key object, and then everything will align to that object. So if I now choose align center, you'll see that the red plane has disappeared underneath the yellow plane because that's where it is in the stacking order, and they are aligned center to the blue plane. I'll just undo that and once again click on the blue plane to make it a key object. And this time I'll choose align top, and you'll see that the yellow and the red plane move down, so they are aligned to that key object. So remember that if you're selecting using the shift key, for example, if I select the blue plane and shift click the red plane, you don't need to hold any key down to make an object a key. You simply click on it, and if it's part of that selected group, it will become the key object. And some operations, such as the distribution operations we'll be looking at shortly, they rely on a key object here in the align, and you can see align to selection. Align to key object, and distribution is, and actually for this, show the orderly spaced. And then I will select all four of them, and I'll choose from the horizontal distribution options. You can see they are, as you would have expected, distributed to the center. So I'll just undo that, and I'll go ahead and do distribute left, and it appears to do exactly the same thing. And I'll go expected, cool, and regularly spaced. Cons I've got that you're seeing that just for this, I'm going to bring out the whole align panel and leave that just here. Just and the mystic as distribute left. Go from rectangle that is into a key object meters, just his object. And let's say Say I want 10 millimeters between those, and I can click on that and I get exactly 10 millimeters between them. So there you are. Of course, as you would probably expect, you can use the alignment commands on anchor points and paths as well. Let's have a look at that because there are a couple of things to watch out for. So I'm going to select this anchor point on the left-hand side here, and then I'm going to make my way across and up to the second of these two peaks. I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the top anchor point there. Now, as it's the last anchor point I selected, it becomes a key anchor. Okay, so if I go ahead now and choose to align to bottom here, it has to take that point up to the invisible bottom of that anchor point. As it's the last anchor point here, it becomes a key anchor. Okay, so if I go ahead now and choose to align to bottom here, or bottom of that anchor point, like so. I'll click on the point at the top of the peak first, hold down Shift and click on the point at the bottom left. And now if I choose align left, it does that anchor, which technically, of course, is on exactly the same axis as the one before. You can also select a range and distribute them as you might with objects. So if I grab a load here by dragging across them with the direct selection tool, what I need to make sure is that it shows align to selection here, not align to artboard, because it does that sometimes as well. Now if I choose my distribute option, it distributes those points evenly across the horizontal space and the vertical space as well if necessary. So all of those operations made with the direct selection tool and just being careful about what you see here in the align panel. By default, when you draw new things or create new things in Illustrator, they normally jump to the front of their stacking order. And the stacking order is hierarchical, Okay, so objects stack within their own layer and layers stack on their own. We'll cover layers in this chapter a bit later on. But here, just shadow for my plane just here. And of course, the shadow from this plane would fall onto the Earth order. Now, I can do that quite quickly by right-clicking and choosing Arrange. And you can see there that I can bring it forward or to the front, or send it backward or to the back. And there are cuts. Command, Shift, Control, hit, not the press. Okay, stacking order. To draw on top, there is a mode that allows us to. You're going to find out how layers can play a part. Even with moving objects. Let's draw something together. Get yourself a new document. It doesn't really matter about the size. Ellipse tool. Mine's set up to have none, but that's just because this comes from a template that sets that up. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to choose a red color to start off with. Okay, click and drag to draw an ellipse. It doesn't matter if it's circular or not. That's not really apt, so it's nice and easy. Or Shift Control A to do Illustrator are stacked this way. They appear on top. And if you watch the previous movie on changing the change how that, okay, again, now that's a shortcut for activating ellipse. You can see it's choose yet another color and modify some up, add a new layer. If we go ahead and click on the add a new layer, and you can see here, it's been, and that's because code is on, almost literally draw new layer, you can see it's add a new layer, you can see it's active, draw inside mode to draw one where there's some room, like so. Okay, and what I'm going to do is activate that third mode, draw inside that mode. Now we'll choose a different color. You're now drawing in. in this title. But the draw modes can be very, very useful, so do practice with them. And remember, if you need to draw something at the bottom of this, layers are probably the best organizational tool that Illustrator has, and you could check out pretty much any of the files used in this course and you would see that this is the introduction file to this particular course that shows how to navigate and turn it off layer by layer. You can see the headline at the top has its own layer. The spaceships have their own layer. The path that weaves around the planets has its own layer. It's actually clipped applied to it. Then there's the stars in the layers panel with a dotted line. That means it has an effect applied to it. It's actually clipped in a special way. Its own layer, and the reason for that, just in case you're wondering, is it's actually clipped in the big one at the top has the planets has its own layer. The planets themselves have their own layer. The title planet, the big one at the top, has its own layer, and the reason for that, just in case you're wondering, is it's actually clipped in a special way using a layer, which is why it looks different here in the layers panel with a dotted line. That means it has an effect applied to it. Then there's the stars, and then there's the rectangle that contains the contour gradient that forms the space background. And beyond that, in Photoshop, you're going to find they're slightly different in Illustrator. I'm going to unlock and open the planets layer, probably organizational friendly. And just so you know, if it was important, you can actually rename even these layers. Even your groups can accurately organize planets layer here. And add numeric names for each layer before, and that is, of course, entirely possible. The new layer icon is at the bottom of to analyze them, and you'll see there's a blue line following where I'm going. So if I wanted to go to the top, what I would do for safety's sake, actual sub layer, which is something used in specialized processes on the library, you'll find in there I actually use highlights over another layer. So I'll unlock one here like this. You can name them quite easily. You can double click on the name and self on there. Maybe the very light blue, but if I zoom in, you can see both things. So these lines don't show anywhere. They are just for you working in Illustrator, but the color coding carries on throughout but still on the layer itself. You can specify the color. Now the color is for all of the vectors that you draw on the layer. That's the color they will appear on there, regardless of their appearance. Okay, if I just go ahead and open perhaps maybe the path layer just here and select it, you'll see that it has a layer identifier there. It's showing as that very light blue, but if I zoom in, you can see both things. So these lines don't show anywhere. They are just for you working in Illustrator, but the color coding carries on throughout with all of your different layers, and you can set that. The Layers panel does have one extra function beyond organization, and that's that it can help you with selection. And it comes also to one of my very few real criticisms about Illustrator, because this is not terribly working. They go ahead and they select something, and in the dot, and what I'm here, actually content. Its technical name is the proxy region, and they put a small box there to encourage you to things, and it was difficult to do that on the artboard. Here, use to another layer 8 up to layer 8, and you'll now see if I move that away, I've got a copy just there. So do use 8 Alt key. So I'm going to copy and drag that when you're trying to select. Organizing our content into groups makes it simple. So L, I'm not entirely sure whether I'm going to have this point. Pointing that way or that way. So I think I'm going to go with this at the moment and then group